Welcome back. I'm Neil Chase, author of Iron Dogs, writer-director of the action thriller Contamination. And today I want to talk about the difference between character-driven stories and plot-driven stories, and which one you should pursue as a writer. So grab your popcorn. Let's get started. But first, hit that like button, subscribe for more writing tip videos like this one, and ring that bell so you don't miss what's coming next. First, let's talk about the difference between character-driven and plot-driven stories. Now, plot-driven stories are ones where we are dealing with essentially a sequence of events. One thing happens, then another thing happens, then another thing happens, and so on. And all you have are characters reacting to these events. It's fairly straightforward, fairly formulaic. Character-driven stories, on the other hand, rely on characters making decisions, and that's what drives the story forward, as well as their own inner growth over that process. So 3 big ways in which character-driven stories, I feel, are superior to plot-driven. First of all, we have the emotional connections that exist in character-driven stories that don't necessarily exist in plot-driven stories. Bottom line, we care more about people than events. So think about Frodo in Lord of the Rings. He's on an epic quest, right? But we stay for Frodo's emotional breakdowns, Sam's loyalty, Aragorn's journey, Gollum's inner conflict. These are the things that compel us to watch. Boromir's growth as a person and his eventual demise and sacrifice because of it. These are the things that pull at us and make us invested and say, I want to stay on the journey with these characters. When a character struggles, grows, or makes tough decisions, we feel that. Why? Because it mirrors the trials and tribulations of our own lives. We see the characters in ourselves. We see ourselves in the characters and their journeys. There's an emotional connection at play. When you have a movie that is simply plot-driven, just a series of events, like, for example, an earthquake hits and a character has to survive it, but then another disaster happens, and then the character has to survive that point, and so on. It's a series usually of external obstacles that stand in a way. That's usually what a plot-driven story entails. That's far less compelling than internal growth that a character-driven story produces. The second way that a character-driven story is superior is it forces characters to be active instead of reactive. So in a plot-driven story, characters are typically reacting to external stimulus. Something happens which forces them to do something in reaction to it. So, for example, if you have a story where a character is robbed at gunpoint, that character does make a decision, yes, has to hand over their wallet or get shot. Well, they do it. They hand over their wallet and then they go on about their day. Then something else happens to them. Maybe the police stops them on their way to, report the crime, but they think he's somehow involved. So now he has to react to that. And so they take him in for questioning. And now when he's in questioning, the district attorney says, oh, we're also looking for somebody who's responsible for these crimes. And now we think you're the person. So now he's reacting to that. So it's just a series of reactions to things happening to them. That's a plot-driven story. Character-driven story will say, this is a character making active decisions for good or bad. So look at Silence of the Lambs. That's a really great example. Clarice, when she's faced with talking with Dr. Hannibal Lecter, must make the choice whether to stay and engage with him and potentially open herself up to his psychological manipulation, which she is aware that he will do to her. And she knows she's vulnerable to the things that he says, yet she makes a conscious decision because she figures it's for the greater good in order to track a killer and save an innocent girl's life, she's going to put her own mental well being in the hands of a monster. That's a conscious decision. That's a character driven story. So it's not a case of where she's simply put in with Dr. Lecter and he gives her a series of tasks and she has to overcome them. And then that leads to another series of tasks which she has to overcome. That's plot driven. So you see the difference? One has clear stakes emotionally, the other, not so much. And this reaction is what makes stakes more personal. Again, we're making it more internalized, more personal. Um, a plot driven story might give us a monster, let's say. A character driven story gives us a main character trying to face that monster by being scared, being brave, being determined, being reluctant, being flawed, having to overcome those flaws. And that leads us to the third reason why character driven stories are better than plot driven. And that is that they make your characters grow over the course of the story, not just react to the events around them. When a character is forced to deal with their inner flaws, with their inner fears, with all of their failings, as they make each decision, and as each decision is harder than the one before it, as the stakes rise and these decisions become more difficult, this is where the magic of the story happens because we see that character grow. At the very least, even if that character is a character with a flat arc and they themselves don't necessarily grow that much, they will force all of the other characters in the story to grow through their decision making. So, either way, there is growth. There is real inner growth occurring. In a plot driven story, you don't have that. You've got fairly flat characters who maybe are portrayed as perfect right from the beginning, right from the get-go, and they don't really grow very much. We've seen this. We've seen this in stories. Captain Marvel is a perfect example, or Rey in Star Wars. These are characters that are pretty much perfect to begin with, don't really have any inner growth. Yes, they affect change on their worlds in a superficial way. How is that? How do I mean that? Well, they defeat evil, right? Good guys win, bad guys lose. But who in that sphere has been changed internally by the journey, by the story? Nobody really. And there's the difference. A lot of people will point to Superman as saying, "Oh, he's a perfect character, so he has no growth." But that's not true. Superman is actually a character throughout the film series that has existed, regardless of which one we're talking about, whether that's Christopher Reeve, Henry Cavill, whoever. That character typically exhibits a lot of inner growth because he is wrestling with the idea that he has godlike powers, but he's not God. So he can't be everywhere at once. He can't save everyone. He has to decide who he saves and who he can't. And imagine being that powerful, but having to make a decision that difficult. That's growth. That's character arc. And that's what makes us invested in his story. And that's why we keep making Superman movies. And the best ones are the ones that lean into that side of him. And really, let's give you a bonus reason why, because that ties into the ones we just talked about. And that is that character arcs stay with us longer, way longer than plot twists. So, what characters do and how they grow, how they change, and how they affect change, these are the things that get people talking. The way Michael Corleone changes in The Godfather, the way Walter White changes in Breaking Bad. These are character arcs we still talk about to this day. These are journeys we talk about. The way Tony Soprano changes in The Sopranos, the way Bruce Wayne changes in Batman. the way Peter Parker changes in Spider-Man. Every one of these is relevant to us because we see the transformation of the person. We see them making a series of increasingly difficult decisions that get them to where they need to be and turn them into the people they're destined to become. When a character changes, we see ourselves reflected in that journey. And that hits differently than simply a aha moment that a plot and plot alone can give us. What are some really good character driven stories that stand out to you? And how do you think they measure up against plot driven stories? I'd really like to hear in the comments below. And on that note, if you're looking for help with your own script, hit me up on neilchasefilm.com and look at my Rewrite to Greenlight method, where we look at every aspect of your script and we tune in on what works, what doesn't, and we make sure to fix it so that it works on every level. Until next time, stay creative.